A sanatorium caretaker hears the story of an elderly woman who was hospitalized and, frightened, immediately calls the police. Hello, welcome, like, subscribe and turn on notifications. Jack was a 27-year-old young man who worked at a sanatorium in the United States. With his job as a janitor, he paid for his college education and dreamed of becoming a psychologist one day. His job was simple. He cleaned the elderly ward, but often some higher-ranking employees would divert his duties and make him give the elderly their medicine and even take care of them. Jack, however, didn't think this was bad. He liked having this greater contact because he liked to understand what led each of these people to end up in that place. The work was simple and most days were calm, without much fuss. Until one day he saw a patient who was giving the staff a lot of work. She was 60 years old, but looked much younger, and something about her manner and demeanor made her stand out from the other patients. However, the woman did not speak. She just mumbled some incomprehensible things. Jack noticed that this lady was always distant from all the patients. Her gaze was almost always vacant and sad. He also noticed that she was a very polite woman. When Jack gave her her pills, she nodded to them as a gesture of thanks. When he cleaned her room, she would leave and stand at the door waiting for him to finish, and then nodded again as a gesture of thanks. It may seem like a simple thing, but in that place it was rare to happen. One day it was raining and very cold. She was knocking on the door as if asking for help. Jack went to her room and tried to understand the gestures she was making, asking him for something. Jack knew what it was and took another blanket, because it was winter and she was very cold. The lady nodded again in thanks, but went to the window that was fogged up and wrote with her fingers. "Help me, I want to write." Pens, pencils, and cell phones were prohibited in the sanatorium for the safety of the patients. Jack wanted to help the lady, but he didn't know how. Although he was afraid of losing his job, Jack was curious to know what she had to say. The next day he went to her room and gave her a notebook and a pen. The lady smiled, and the first word she wrote was "thank you." Then she wrote that she wanted his help to get out of there, but first she would tell him everything that had happened to convince him to help her. The lady then told her story. Amelia Thompson, a 60-year-old woman, lived in the United States. She lived in a large house with her two children, Richard, 25, and Emily, 22. Despite her age, she did not intend to retire anytime soon, as she enjoyed what she did and wanted to leave everything in order for her children, so that they would never be in need. However, her work was taking up too much of her time and even her health. Because of this, she began to feel dizzy frequently, but she never went to the doctor. After a tiring day at work taking care of her companies, Amelia came home and found Emily parading around the living room in a new outfit and looking at herself in the mirror. Her mother realized that they were luxury clothes and had no idea how much they had cost. But Amelia was shocked when she looked at the sofa in the living room. It was full of bags. There were so many that she couldn't even imagine why her daughter had bought so many clothes. "Emily, why did you buy so many clothes? There are more clothes here than you can fit in your closet," said Amelia. "I needed to buy new clothes, Mom, and update my closet. I got rid of all the old clothes I had and threw them in the trash," Emily said. Amelia immediately went outside and looked at the trash can. It was full of clothes, so many clothes that some were lying on the floor because they didn't fit in the huge trash can the house had. That made Amelia angry. She couldn't understand why her daughter had to throw so many new clothes in the trash. But the worst part for Amelia was that her daughter didn't even think about donating her clothes. Her mother started an argument with her daughter, trying to talk sense into her, but it was no use. When Amelia asked when she was going to start college or help her with the company, Emily gave her an irritated look and went to her room without saying anything. Amelia sat on the couch, unable to bear the headache she was feeling. Before she could even rest, she received a call. It was her son Richard. He said he was at the police station and that he would be arrested if she didn't help him. Amelia felt a chill down her spine and ran to see her son. There she found Richard handcuffed, and it was clear that he had been drinking a lot. The police said that he drove in that state and hit a cyclist, but luckily the cyclist only suffered minor scratches. Amelia was so disappointed in her son that she didn't even say a word to him. However, she resolved the whole situation and paid his bail, in addition to paying the cyclist's damages and compensating him with a good amount of money for what her son had done to him. Amelia was crying while driving her car while Richard was in the back seat sleeping. At home, she didn't bother to wake him up and left him in the car. Amelia went to her room and, with a huge headache, thought about what had gone wrong with her children. The next day, she made a decision and met with the two of them. Both Richard and Amelia would have to leave home, and they would no longer have the credit card she gave them. Amelia would have to start working at her mother's company and start her studies at college. Richard was already working at the company, but he would have to pay for all the damages his mother had paid to the cyclist, in addition to the damage to the car that would no longer be his. The two were angry and opposed their mother's attitude, saying that she could not do this to them. However, Amelia did not want to argue and gave them 2 weeks to leave the house and find another place to live. The two immediately went to the bank and tried to withdraw as much money as they could, but it was too late. Both of their cards were already canceled. Amelia was sad that it had to come to this point and cried for several hours, but she knew it was necessary for her children to become better, responsible people. The other day, while returning from work, Amelia began to feel even more severe pain in her head, and when she got home, she sat on the sofa. She couldn't stand it anymore, and when she picked up the phone to call one of her children, she fainted. When she woke up, she didn't know how much time had passed, but it was still daylight. But when she looked at her cell phone screen, she realized it was the next day. She spent 24 hours on that couch, and none of her children did anything. Unfortunately, she felt strange. She couldn't move normally, and her mouth felt strange. She could barely speak. With difficulty, she sent a text message to her 2 children, who were slow to respond. They then took her to the hospital, where the doctor told her that all the stress had left its mark on her brain. Amelia could no longer move one leg normally, but her speech was mainly affected. However, with time, she could return to her former self. Amelia cried for several hours. She could still walk despite her leg, but what worried her most was her speech. She could not say a single word fully and was afraid that this would be permanent. Due to her condition, her children stayed home for a while longer and took care of their mother's business. Fortunately, after a few months, Amelia's leg was moving normally again, but her speech still hadn't returned. Richard and Emily called their mother to talk and told her that she needed to get out of the house for a while and not worry about anything. She dedicated a lot of time to work and to them, so it was only fair that Amelia rested in some paradise and took a good vacation. This left Amelia delighted. For the first time, she saw her children worrying about her. Excited, she agreed to travel and let the two of them plan the entire trip for her. It was a 2-week trip with the right to visit the tourist sites. Amelia was excited and thanked her children for the gift. On the plane, she felt even better and was grateful that her children were changing as people. When she got off the plane, Amelia picked up her luggage and a car was waiting to take her to the hotel. She looked out the window and thought the place was very far from the city, besides being in a deserted area. But finally she arrived at the hotel. However, it was not written hotel on the facade of the building, but rather sanatorium. Amelia wondered what kind of bad joke this was, and with gestures demanded the driver to take her to the hotel. However, 3 men who worked there came and held Amelia back. They asked if she was the new patient, and the driver said yes. She was forcibly taken inside and has not been able to leave since. After Jack read her story, he didn't know what to do. Could Amelia be lying to him just so she could get out of there? It was then that she wrote down the phone number and told him to talk to this man so that everything would be clear to Jack. He took the number and left his room. Before leaving work, Jack passed by Amelia and said that he would call that phone number, and if everything was true, he would do everything he could to get her out of that place. With tears in her eyes, Amelia smiled. The next day, Jack called the number and told the man on the other end of the line everything. When he returned to work the next day, he found the place full of police officers and Amelia standing next to a man in a black suit. She walked over to him and gave him a hug. The man in the suit also walked up to him and shook his hand. He was a longtime friend of Amelia's and also her personal lawyer. Everything Amelia told Jack was true. The lawyer also discovered that the whole thing was planned by Amelia's children. They paid the director of the sanitarium to keep Amelia locked up there and told everyone that she had retired and was traveling for an indefinite period of time. However, her mother's love was still strong in her, and so she did not report her children and asked her lawyer not to tell the police that they were the ones who did it. Amelia was happy to be free, but sadness could still be seen in her eyes. 4 years had passed in the blink of an eye. Richard and Emily were packing up their things and leaving the large house they had lived in with their mother for most of their lives. They were broke. After they sent their mother to the sanitarium, the two of them took over her businesses. However, neither of them were good at management and found the work boring. After 4 years, they finally declared bankruptcy and had lost everything: house, car. Their bank accounts were empty, but strangely neither of them were sad. The day before, they had received a visit from a lawyer who was a longtime friend of Amelia. He gave them the sad news that their mother had passed away, but that they probably wouldn't be entitled to any of her other assets. Emily and Richard were at a loss as to how they, her children, wouldn't be entitled to her inheritance. The lawyer then said something that left them speechless. The two of them weren't her biological children, and, on top of that, their birth certificate was falsified. To help them understand better, the lawyer told them more about Amelia. Amelia was born in the United States, but she was the daughter of immigrants, and because of that, her life was not easy. For years, they tried to improve their lives and provide conditions so that their daughter would not suffer what they had suffered. But this was quite difficult due to the family's financial situation. Years later, Amelia's father passed away, making her and her mother's lives even more difficult. Fortunately, Amelia's mother met a young man a few years later and the two fell in love. Because he had better living conditions, Amelia was able to study at good schools and have a better life. Years passed and her mother and stepfather had already passed away, but they gave Amelia several opportunities to get ahead in life, and she took advantage of them all. She created a true empire and was one of the most influential and richest women in her city. However, all this money was not enough for Amelia to feel complete. She wanted to have a child, but she never found a man who she felt was worthy of being their father. Unfortunately, she discovered that she had a serious condition in her uterus that would have to be removed. She would never be able to have children. This was very upsetting for Amelia, but close friends told her that if it wasn't the end of her dream of motherhood, she could adopt. For months, she went to orphanages wanting to adopt a child. But one day, a friend of hers asked her for help. She knew a couple who had tried to cross the border into the United States with 2 children, but unfortunately, the couple did not survive on the way. The children escaped, but were hiding from the authorities. Her friend said that if the children were found by the authorities, they would probably be taken back to their home country where they had no family and would suffer in an orphanage in a poor country. This affected Amelia and she decided to help. She and the lawyer wanted to do everything legally, but they realized that it wouldn't be possible. So they created birth certificates that weren't real and Amelia adopted the children. They were Richard and Emily. The two were shocked, but what shook them the most was finding out how much money and assets Amelia still had in her name. It was worth millions. The lawyer, seeing how sad they were, said that she had left them something in her will, but they would have to go to the place where Amelia was buried to file the lawsuit. Immediately, the two changed their expressions and were even smiling. They were not even shocked by the news of being adopted or their mother no longer being alive. It seemed to shake them. After they had packed everything, the two went to the other city. Richard and Emily were euphoric. During the flight, they both made plans about how they would spend the money. She would buy a huge house and have a room with only clothes. His dream was to wear a new outfit every day for a whole year. Richard wanted to party, have fun with his friends, and never have to work again. The lawyer first took them to see Amelia's grave, but there they met a young man. It was Jack. He introduced himself and said that he was a friend of Amelia's and that he had been by her side in her final moments. The lawyer then took out the will and told her Amelia's wishes. 98% of my entire fortune must be donated to charities that I have supported throughout my life, and the other 2% will be left to my 2 adopted children, Richard and Emily. However, on the condition that they return to their home country, this amount will not be given in full. They will receive the amount equivalent to a minimum wage in their country until the money runs out. If they do not wish to move to another country, the full amount must be donated to a charity. The brothers were outraged. They did not know what to do. They were not qualified to work where they were, and without money they would suffer greatly. But if they moved, they would go to a different country, a poorer place, but they would gain something, even if it was little. Emily could not stop crying, and Richard was red with rage. The 2 had no choice but to accept their mother's wishes. After signing the documents, the 2 would leave the United States and would have to struggle to live abroad. The 2 left the place, and Jack and the lawyer were left alone. Shortly after, Amelia came to them. She was alive. Her look was one of unhappiness. Even after everything they had done to her, her mother's love still beat strong in her chest. After leaving the sanatorium, Amelia did not want to return to her hometown and wanted to forget everything. She became friends with Jack, his wife, and was the godmother of his newborn son. For 4 years, she lived peacefully in that place and did not miss home or work. Retirement life was better than she expected, until she learned that the companies she had built had gone bankrupt. Her children had nothing left, and even after everything, she wanted to be able to help them, but not in the way they would have liked. She planned everything with her lawyer and Jack. Amelia did give away part of her fortune, but it was only 50%. As for her children, she would send them the agreed-upon bill every month. She knew they would suffer, but it was necessary. Amelia left the cemetery thoughtfully, praying that one day her children would change and she would be able to see them again, this time as good, responsible people. I hope you enjoyed the story. Like, comment, and share. Thanks for watching.